or any of my legislative...
There we go. Well, we'll get started now. Good morning, everyone. This is Commissioner Mary Faith Bell. Today is Tuesday, June 27th, 2023, and we'll call this meeting to order at 8 a.m. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to mute your phones. You can do this by pressing star 6. Please unmute yourself when called to speak. Again, pressing star 6. It's very important for all others to remain muted. Thank you. Well, welcome. We will skip the Board of Commissioners roll call this morning because it's just me. My fellow commissioners are unavailable, so I am happy to be here with you, and we'll jump right into Adventist Health Tillamook.
Hey, good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
We have, 14 patients in the hospital today, plus 2 brand new babies. Surgery cases scheduled there at 10. We had 9 911 transports yesterday, no transfers and no transports home. 94 patients boarding in emergency departments across Oregon. That's 15 less than yesterday. There's 397 patients who their discharge has been delayed because there's no place for them to go, and that's 5 less than yesterday across Oregon. Let's see. Last week we had a job fair here at Adventist Health. We have around 60 open positions, and we had, I think, 17 people turned out for the job fair. Positions like X-ray tech, registration and scheduling, certified nursing assistants, RNs, LPNs, EMTs, food service associates. So we had a great turnout for that first time we've done a job fair, so that was great. If you know somebody who's looking for employment, feel free to send them to our website. I also just want to share a little bit of information without breaching confidentiality. We had a crash on Highway 101 on Sunday morning that I've seen a lot posted about on Facebook and other places. And I just want to say that the crews did an amazing job, everybody that was out there. And I want to specifically talk about 2 people. And I'm not going to give their names, but it just shows how we get to treat people differently in rural health care. When the crash occurred, one of our emergency department nurses was directly behind the incident with her family and stopped and rendered care. A paramedic supervisor was on his way home, heard it paged out, turned around, and responded to the scene. And I just really want to thank both of those people who continued to work throughout the day. The emergency department nurse actually left her family to continue on to the beach, and she returned to the hospital in one of the ambulances with the patient she cared for, and then cared for that patient through their entire emergency department stay. So great work, great dedication. Also, when we have a crash that involves multiple patients like this one does, we call back additional staff, and our staff did not hesitate to come back in, and they did a great job working together. Can't say enough about the ambulance crews, what great work they did, all the fire department personnel, and of course law enforcement. It was a lot of great teamwork on Sunday morning, and I'm grateful. So with that, unless you have something else for me, I'll go back on mute.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate your report, and I'm grateful that you brought up that accident because, of course, it's on people's minds. It was a big deal, and I thought about all of our first responders in the hospital as I was reading about it because there were a number of patients, weren't there?
Yeah, there were a total of 7 patients from the incident. And so in Tillamook County, our plan is 5 patients or more, we consider it a mass casualty incident or a multi-patient scene, and we mobilize resources based on the number of patients. So in this case, we called it an MCI level 2, and that mobilizes pre-hospital resources, fire, EMS, law enforcement. It activates the hospital, activates life flight, and so we're pre-planning how do we care for 7 injured people in one incident.
Thank you. Having worked at the hospital previously, I was thinking about remembering drills for mass casualty incidents and thinking how helpful it is for our healthcare providers and emergency first responders to go through those drills to prepare so that when it actually happens, everybody knows exactly what to do and they can just do what they've practiced. So Thank you for your service, and thanks to all the first responders and the emergency, the editors, everyone who was involved in that, what had to be a traumatic incident for everyone, and of course our best thoughts, our highest hopes for the people who were actually hurt.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Well, if we don't have any other questions for Eric, we will move into the Coastal Caucus. And I know that Representative Gomberg is here. I heard your voice earlier, and I reached out last night. I apologize for the short notice to Senator Weber and Representative Javity, so I hope that they're here too. So who do we have from the Coastal Caucus?
Well, I'm pausing, Commissioner, to see if any of my colleagues speak up. Senator Weber, Representative Javity? Well, I'm very pleased to be with all of you this morning, Commissioner, you and your listeners, and to tell you that late on Sunday afternoon, the legislative session adjourned. And central to that adjournment was the fact that for about 6 weeks, more than 30 days, the Senate was not convening. The Senate was not meeting because relying on the quorum rules there, 10 members or more had decided to not participate, and that meant that there were no votes going on the Senate side. The House, where I served, was doing our work. The committees were continuing to meet, and there were nearly 400 pieces of legislation that were backed up when the Senate was able to come into session about a week ago and start working their way through that backlog. I got to tell you, a month ago, I wasn't sure how this session was going to end. I wasn't sure whether we were going to have one of our best and most successful sessions or whether we were going to have a complete failure and one of our worst sessions ever. And at the end of the process, I think we did okay. You will remember that I met with all of you several months ago when the session was just getting started to talk about the governor's declaration of emergency housing. And she had taken some steps to provide some additional support for housing and homelessness, but had focused all of that in our urban centers around the state. And I found myself in the interesting position of being a Democratic legislator who was being critical of a new Democratic governor because her housing declaration had not reached Coastal Oregon or Southern Oregon or Eastern Oregon. And I prevailed upon her to expand the emergency declaration so counties like Tillamook could apply to participate in that declaration. But at the end of the day, when that funding measure for the governor's housing proposals moved through, it came through the committee that I co-chair, and we were able to add nearly $30 million to support rural housing. That's a big deal. And I would say that housing was the primary focus of this legislative session, as it is a primary concern in our local communities around the state, whether you're in a big city or in a small city or a rural community. Housing's not just an urban issue, it's an Oregon issue, and we've made some progress on the housing issue. But as bills came through in the last week, and they came through the Senate rather quickly, there were a number of other really large and consequential measures that were being approved. And I want to highlight a couple of them. One of them I'm particularly proud of is a piece that I worked on called the Rural Economic Development Package. And what we did is I was asked by the Speaker to convene a group of both Republicans and Democrats, so it was a bipartisan group, trying to identify the needs in rural Oregon that could help our local economies. And we put together a series of 9 bills that dealt with things like helping small farmers with meat processing so that you don't have to put your cattle on a truck and drive them for a couple of hours to see a meat inspector. We were trying to decentralize that process, make it easier for small farmers. We wanted to help the fishing community get more of their product into local restaurants. Listen to this. Only 10% of the seafood served in Oregon restaurants comes from Oregon waters. And we wanted to turn that around. Even if we made a 10% change in that statistic, that would be about a $50 million benefit to the Oregon fishing fleet. So trying to get more of our Oregon seafood into Oregon restaurants. We wanted to work with small business development centers to help more small businesses get on their feet. We wanted to work with the outdoor recreation industry and help them. And we also put a portion into this bill to help our county fairs, like the wonderful fair there in the city of Tillamook for Tillamook County. So all of those bills were consolidated together into one bill at the end of session, and that moved through in the final 3 days of session about $70 million of investments to support rural economic development. Now, there's another big thing going on the coast, and it's a little bit further down the beach than where we are, but it's a big deal, and that is that we were able to put together a measure that was going to allow the Port of Coos Bay to apply for deepening their navigation channel there at the port. Now, the Port of Coos Bay used to be a thriving, vibrant economic machine on the Oregon coast, but with changes in the timber industry, they now suffer the highest unemployment in the state, about 8%. There are problems in Coos Bay, but there's also a plan to try and put together a major West Coast container port there in Coos County. Now, when these big boats come over and they're loaded with containers or taking our products off around the Pacific Rim, they either go out of Los Angeles or out of Oakland or out of Tacoma. A few of the smaller boats can navigate up the Columbia to the Port of Portland, but Oregon does not have a major container port on the Pacific. The thing that's really unique about Coos Bay is that they are served directly with a rail line, which means that the boxes can come off the boats and go directly onto a train instead of getting trucked around our coastal highways, through Portland, up the I-5, and putting them directly on a rail line means that they can go all the way to the Midwest without having to get on a truck. That actually reduces the carbon footprint of that process by about more than 50%. But if we can get a container port operating in Coos Bay by deepening the navigation channel there, that's going to create, they estimate 3,000 new clean jobs in an area of Oregon that's really suffering. So I'd say this is a really big deal for the coast. We were able to bring some other bills through in the closing days. One that I worked on is trying to help our students in our schools be better prepared for natural disasters, whether it's an earthquake or a tsunami, fire, flood, drought. I've been working on that a couple of years. That bill made it to the finish line. Another one that I think may be of concern to you is how do we deal with abandoned and derelict vessels in our waterways? People dump their boats, and they lie in the water to rot and to leak, and the state has to come in and try and get them out of there, and it's an expensive process. And that was being handled by the Department of State Lands, and any money that the Department of State Lands spends on derelict vessels is money that does not go into the Common School Fund. Well, think about that for a minute. Because we're getting dirty boats out of the water, we're putting less money into our schools. So I was able to create a special fund and put some money into it so that we can protect the Common School Fund and do a better job of addressing abandoned and derelict vessels. And my only regret there is that we're not able to expand that to start dealing with abandoned and derelict RVs that are being dumped on our roadsides as well. But that's a whole different story. At the end of the day, the session concluded, and I would say that it was a successful session because we were able to put record money into housing, record money into behavioral health. We were able to support public safety and fund public defenders, and I think most significantly put a record amount of money into our K through 12 education system to support our kids and our educators. So a lot going on there, Commissioner, all of it concluding on Sunday afternoon. The final thing I want to talk about is process, because I began this report by telling you that for 6 weeks the Senate was not able to meet because 10 members chose to boycott the process. Here in Oregon, we have a requirement in the legislature that 2/3 of the members be present before they can gather in and to start to vote on anything, which means that if a minority of members are unhappy with a particular issue or process, that they can stay away and the whole process grinds to a halt. I mean, think of that in terms of your own commission. you've got 3 commissioners. If 1/3 of them decides they don't like something, can they just simply refuse to attend, and that means you can't meet? No, because you've got a system where if 2 out of 3 are there, then you've got a quorum and you can do business. Well, it doesn't work that way in the legislature. 1/3 of the members can walk out, and we have seen in the last 5 years 7 walkouts. We've seen walkouts over school funding, over climate, over redistricting, over COVID regulations, and this year a walkout focused on abortions, guns, and whether legislative measures can be easily read and understood by an 8th grader, which is an interesting concern. So at the end of the session, I sponsored a piece of legislation that would change the quorum requirements so that the legislature could in fact convene when a majority of members are present. And that's the way they do it in 46 states around the country, but right now, not the way we do it here in Oregon. And you'll remember last election that a majority of Oregonians, 70% of us, voted for Measure 113, which was designed to end the walkouts by punishing people that stayed away. And we've seen that just simply didn't work. That was Plan B. I'm trying to go with Plan A, which says, but let's just change the quorum rules. Democrats have walked out on Republicans. Republicans have walked out on Democrats. This is not a partisan issue. This is a process issue. We need to change the Constitution. I introduced a bill, and it was the beginning of a conversation that I hope will end up with this question being on your ballots so that you can all vote on whether we want to change quorum rules in Oregon. My bill, introduced in the last week of the session, was never going to pass, and it didn't. But it's a starting point, and we will be back to discuss this in greater detail going forward. So that's a very quick and rough overview of what has transpired in Salem over the last 6 months. I hope now that we're back and we don't have early morning committee meetings that your representatives and senators from Tillamook County will be able to join you on these calls. But with that, let me pause to see if you've got any questions for me.
Thank you so much. Before I start asking questions, I just want to check again and ask if Senator Weber or Representative Javity have been able to join us.
Well, Commissioner, let's remind people that with the changes in legislative boundaries that went into effect in January, I no longer represent part of Tillamook County. I used to represent the southern half, and I got to tell you, I miss Tillamook County, but now my district begins on the Lincoln County line. But when my committee that I chair adjourned this year, that didn't keep me from giving gifts to all the committee members that came from Tillamook County, and they all got 2 pounds of Black Label Tillamook cheese.
Nice. Oh, nice. Well, I am very grateful to you for being here, and while indeed you're no longer our representative, you, in fact, represent us on the Coastal Caucus. As the chair of the Coastal Caucus, Representative Gomberg represents the entire region, coastal region, and I'm grateful for your leadership, and I'm grateful to you for joining us on this call. And I will reach out to Senator Weber and Representative Javity again and invite them back to the call. I know they've been busy through the legislative session, and I look forward to having them back on the call also. And I would like to ask you some questions if you have a few more minutes.
All right. Well, I will be happy to hear the questions, and I hope that I've got answers for you.
Okay. So first, thank you for talking about the quorum rules and the process, because I've been reading about that and wondering about that, about how what would it take to get people back to the table so that they had to work together? You know, I understand that there are philosophical differences and obviously political differences, but it seems like we're growing further and further apart. And I've been thinking about what does it take to come back together and work together to resolve difficult issues. And it seems like a majority rule for the quorum might accomplish that, because if the majority is going to be able to pass the legislation, then I would hope that everybody would come back to the table and talk about it, try to work through the meaty issues. So I support that approach. I think the way it's been going with walkouts. I do understand why people walk out, and it doesn't seem like the best process for Oregon. It was frustrating to me just to know that people had worked on those 400 pieces of legislation you were talking about for a couple of years. So it's a couple of years of work that got stalled and rushed at the last minute, and it's just, I agree that the process needs to be adjusted. So thank you very much for working on that.
Well, thank you for saying so. I mean, what does it take? I mean, sure, we can change the rules, and that will solve the problem, but there's something else going on there, and that is, it has a lot to do with relationships, the ability of people to work together, and the willingness of people to work together. I work across the partisan aisle. I work with Republicans. I'm friendly with Republicans. I think of myself as a moderate from a purple district, and take the time to get to know people who have a different point of view. I understand these walkouts. There are issues that any one of us feel strongly enough about that we would use every single tool available to us to reflect those values and those concerns. But that doesn't mean that we should have a process that allows me to shut down the entire legislative process over one or two strongly felt values. Part of our problem is that a third of the legislators this year are brand new. And last session, a third more were brand new. And people may see that as refreshing to get new faces and new voices and new ideas into the Capitol. But it also means that they don't have relationships with each other. That takes time to build that level of trust. And so in the House, we've been successful in overcoming some of these concerns. We show up, we argue, we amend, and we debate, and then we vote. I mean, I think that's the way it's supposed to work. Over in the Senate, not so much. They've gotten further and further apart. They don't have those relationships. And at the end of the day, it was easier to walk out than it was to stay and try and fix things. But, the other part of that is that just because you got the majority doesn't mean that you get to drive a steamroller. You still got to steer around the potholes and maneuver a piece of legislation to a point where it helps all of Oregon and not just particular parts of Oregon. And I get that as well. So we can fix the procedural rules, but we also need to fix the process so that we're able to work more effectively together. And I'm a big believer in that.
As am I. Thank you for your work on some of the other things you mentioned. $30 million for rural housing. That is a really big deal. I continue to believe that housing is, if not the top concern in rural coastal Oregon, it's certainly in the top 5, and our lack of housing is just crippling in a lot of ways. So thank you very much for working on that and for working with the governor to see that rural Oregon needed that emergency housing declaration funding. So thanks.
Well, you're very welcome, and let's not forget that while we're talking about housing, we're also talking about homelessness, and we're also talking about behavioral health, health care, and the criminal justice system. All of those pieces fit together in a very complicated way. I know you well understand that we talk about more housing, and that's a big part of the solution. So is addressing homelessness and behavioral health and addiction support and a lot of related issues.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask a little bit more about, you said there was a legislation you worked on for students in schools to prepare for emergencies. Could you talk a little more about that?
I'd love to. I'm a believer in that education is generational, and by that I mean that sometimes parents and grandparents learn from their kids. So if we can teach kids some skills in school, they'll bring that home. And my proposal was that we allocate some time in our schools, not a requirement, but a recommendation, that they provide age-appropriate information on natural disasters. And natural disasters means different things in different parts of the state. Where we are, it may certainly involve preparing for an earthquake or a tsunami or, God forbid, another wildfire. In other parts of Oregon, it could mean heavy snowfall or drought or even issues with the water coming out of the tap not being drinkable, which we've seen in some of our cities from time to time. So I want age-appropriate information in our schools. For example, I'd like our younger kids learning how do you communicate with your family if you're separated when something happens? Where do you meet? Where do you go? And how do you reconnect? What's in a Go Kit? How many do you need, and where do you keep them? I'd like some of our older kids learning about first aid or community engagement or communications. I just want our kids to be better prepared. And when I testified on this bill, I used the example that in my family we had a plan, and we put that plan together to face the possible eventuality of an earthquake here on the coast. And we never imagined that we would need it for a wildfire. But when we got the evacuation notice, after 3 days without power at 5:30 in the morning, and it's still dark outside, and we get a notice that we have to leave. We had a plan. That plan saved us time when we didn't have any time. And sadly, most Oregonian families do not have a plan like that. If we can start in their schools by teaching kids what a plan may entail, they're going to bring that information home. Oregon's going to be better prepared for whatever Mother Nature may throw at us. Again, it's not a requirement. The only requirement is that the Department of Education help prepare the materials so that individual teachers don't have to sit down and put lesson plans together on emergency planning. But we'll have the tools available so that schools can use these resources, and maybe spend 1 day a year talking to kids about what to do when Mother Nature takes a hard turn.
That's excellent. Thank you. As the liaison to emergency preparedness in Tillamook County, I'm really excited about that. I think there's a lot of work in emergency preparedness going on in our coastal communities, and I honestly don't know how much work on that subject is going on in schools, but it makes absolutely great sense for it to be happening in tandem with volunteer groups in schools, for whole families to be preparing. So I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I think the coast is better prepared than most of Oregon, but I don't think that we are well enough prepared. We've got a long way to go, and the rest of Oregon's got a long way to go catching up with us. They think the earthquake is a coastal issue, and it's not.
Yes, I agree. So do you happen to know about SB 5506, about funding for the Shiloh levy?
5506 should have been one of the funding bills that came through at the very end of session, and I'd have to take a look at it, Commissioner, to see what, if I'm not mistaken, the levy was included in that.
And it was, and I did, yes, it was, and I just thought we could talk about it together.
Well, what I don't recall is whether it is lottery bonds or general funds, which is a technical way of saying I don't recall whether you get the money right away or whether you have to wait until we sell lottery bonds to get you the money. But we were able to secure a lot of funding for a lot of local projects, that being one of them. You'll remember that 2 years ago I fought to get money for the emergency egress out of Nescoin, and also connect the port to the sewer system in Toledo. Those are the kind of things that come through in those last-minute spending bills. I am not as familiar with the allocations in Tillamook County as I am the ones that I'm very, very proud of in Lincoln County. But we also were able to put a plan together to support tide gates, and that's going to be very important to you in your waterways.
Oh, that is great. Yeah, that is great. Well, I'll wrap up here by saying thank you for working on the special fund for derelict vessels. It's really important, I know, to the Port of Garibaldi. It's an ongoing, constant problem. And so I didn't know that money that had been spent to clean up derelict vessels came from school funds, so I'm doubly grateful now.
Excellent. Well, listen, you know that you can reach out to me anytime, not only when I'm wearing my Coastal Caucus hat, but just because we're neighbors and friends. And we said a few minutes ago, relationships are critically important in the governing process. And I'm glad that we've got those relationships with you and your fellow commissioners and the good people of Tillamook County. I miss them, but I'm going to stay out of the way while they are represented by the people that are there now, and I'll be available to help anytime that I can.
Well, thank you. We are very grateful for your service. We're grateful for you joining us on this call and for your long-standing service to Tillamook County, and I'm grateful that you're our neighbor.
Indeed. Well, have a wonderful day. It's going to be a beautiful day at the coast. Drive carefully.
Yes. Thank you for that reminder. Thank you. And take care. Have a good summer.
Indeed. We'll talk again soon.
Okay. Bye-bye. Okay. Well, then we will follow up with the Tillamook County Community Health Center. Do we have Ed Colson with us this morning? Or Marlene, somebody from Tillamook County Community Health Center?
Just good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Gail?
I'm fine. I'm sorry I was unmuting. I hope this is a good time.
This is the perfect time. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you, and good morning, everyone. A general update about the Nehalem Bay Health District plans for a new health center. Folks, including myself, are continuing to focus on project plans for the new health center. This is going to include reaching out to the community, just like we did previously with town halls and other feedback sessions to keep the community informed, to answer questions, and to collect feedback. And my other announcement for this morning is, again, Nehalem Bay Health Center's wellness team leads a walking group in North County every Tuesday, and the weather's looking better and better each Tuesday. These are at 10 o'clock in the morning on Tuesdays. Community members are invited to join. Check out our website or Facebook page, Nehalem Bay Health, for the locations each week. And, of course, we're pleased to be a part of this through the Tillamook County Wellness Walking Groups, and more information about other groups across Tillamook County is available, and you can get that information, TillamookCountyWellness.org. Visit TillamookCountyWellness.org. And those are my announcements for this morning.
Thank you, Gail. I read about that walking group last night. I think the walk today is on the Cedar Trail at Rockaway Beach, which I confess I haven't walked yet, but I know a lot of people who have, and they said it's absolutely beautiful, and it's a level path, and good for people with limited mobility. It's just and just a gorgeous trail. So I encourage people to get out there and join that group at the Cedar walking trail in Rockaway Beach this morning at 10.
Yes, I agree. It's a very lovely walk. I've done it, and it's very much worth the pleasurable time. So, thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Did we have Ben Kenny Williams with us this morning from Tillamook Family Counseling Center?
Good morning, Commissioner Bell.
Good morning.
Good morning. Frank Henry Williams, Tillamook Family Counseling Center, Behavioral Health Services for Tillamook County residents. You can reach us for information about services, requests for appointments by calling 503-842-8201 or 1-800-962-2851. Just wanted to just make note of one thing this morning. We recently completed one of our TPR, question, persuade, and refer series, which was a evidence-based suicide prevention format, and we just recently did that with the staff of Tillamook Bay Community College, and I think that is turning out to be a very supportive kind of format for learning about those kinds of skills, the kinds of skills that one would want to learn to be a support to a neighbor who may be feeling depressed and feeling like there may be something there that in which they're thinking about self-harm. So I want to just sort of mention this because we are open to being able to do this and present this kind of supportive and learning format in other workplaces in Sonoma County. And it's free of charge. It is done by one of the staff here who has done this many times in the community. And if you are in a workplace in which you are feeling that you and your colleagues may be able to benefit from this kind of 1.5 hour intervention in which you leave with some a bit more knowledge about what you might be able to do in supporting a coworker who may be not feeling the way that they want to feel about a number of things, and to be supportive around this suicide prevention initiative, we'd be more than happy to hear from you about that and to be able to put something together. So, if you, again, 503-842-8201, and if you have some questions about this, if you ask specifically questions, but you have some questions about the QPR presentations, we'd be more than happy to work with you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Do we have any questions today?
If you have some questions, I'll be glad to take them.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions for Frank? Well, thanks for your work and that of your team on suicide prevention. You know, there's just hardly a more important issue, and we hear far too often about tragic losses to suicides right here in our community. So thank you very much for working on that.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Brown, are you with us this morning?
Good morning, I am here.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay, thank you.
I had a little problem getting to the unmute button quick enough, so nothing major to report. This weekend was kind of a standard busy weekend. Compared to last weekend, we're actually down overall calls by just a few. We did have some highlight calls that were, garnered a lot of attention. Eric Swanson with Adventist Health touched on the major accident that happened on Highway 101. That was shortly followed by another accident where a vehicle found itself in Tillamook Bay along Bay Ocean Road, which is, never good, obviously, but they garnered a little bit of attention. I know that our fire departments were busy. There was multiple fires this weekend. Brush fires, vehicle fires, they were very busy. Unfortunately, that's a trend we are seeing on a regular basis, and hopefully people can practice safety when they're dealing with fires as we go through this summer and it gets drier. So we just continue to plug away and try to do the best that we can and conduct traffic stops as well as respond to calls and keep up with reports. And hopefully our recruitment will continue and we can continue to see an uptick in staffing. So with that, that's all I have, and I can take any questions.
Thank you, Sheriff. Do you have any questions for the Sheriff? If not, I'll say thank you and move on to emergency management. And Randy Thorpe is not with us this morning because he is at a FEMA training. Perfect for the emergency manager. And so I'll give a brief update as the liaison to emergency management. I'd like to report on a meeting we were in last week on Thursday of the, I think they're calling it TC4, Tillamook County 4, but I confess I don't know what the 4 stands for. But what it is a meeting in Central County. It's meeting in Bay City on the 4th Thursday of the month from 10 to 12 at the Bay City Hall in their meeting room. And it's emergency preparedness groups from all over the county. and it was very dynamic. So there was the North County EDC Emergency Volunteer Corps and the North County Medical Reserve Corps, and there were folks there from Rockaway Beach and from Garibaldi and Bay City, from Tillamook, from Cape Mears and New Tarts, and from South County, and there were folks there from the media, and so it was really great. It was a very dynamic group of people all over the county who are working on emergency preparedness. And I'm mentioning this in case anyone who's listening is interested in this topic and interested in getting involved. It's a couple of things that we talked about that I thought were exciting and important are planning for a countywide training, and it's in the idea stages. But at this point, something that we talked about was having maybe on the Great Shakeout Day in October, having a drill where each community will practice as if the Cascadia subduction zone event had happened, as if we'd had an offshore earthquake that would result in a tsunami. The communities will practice the tsunami evacuation routes, and then practice gathering at the gathering sites, and then come back together and process how did it work, how did it go, what worked, what didn't work. So we have a lot of information now about what will happen in the event of a big offshore earthquake, how long it'll take a tsunami to get to shore, how long it'll take certain communities to evacuate. We've developed all the evacuation routes, so a lot of really essential information is already available to us that we didn't have 15 years ago. We have it now. We have information about beat the wave, like how long it'll take walking, running, etc. Like how long would it take in a certain community to get from point A to point B, and could you beat the wave? So with all that information, what's left is for us to make sure that people who live here in our coastal areas know that information and get to practice the evacuation routes. Because something we learned in the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and subsequent tsunami in Japan was that the majority of deaths that happened there were from the tsunami, and that the people who survived were people who had regularly practiced their evacuation routes. So people who felt the shaking, knew exactly what to do, they were prepared, they got out, they gathered the people around them and evacuated, were the people who survived. So that's what we need to do here. So that's exciting, forthcoming. We just started the planning. If you want to be involved in that, you can let me know, or Randy Thorpe, and you are invited to that monthly meeting. And also we talked about having North Tillamook County Emergency Volunteer Corps and Medical Reserve Corps. North Tillamook County has been working on emergency preparedness for longer than any other community in Tillamook County. Since about 2010, they started, after the big 2000 storm where they were totally isolated, they gathered and said, hey, we weren't prepared for this, what can we do? So they've been working on this for a long time, and they've developed a fabulous model that is known statewide, and I learned recently that it's known nationwide. So they're really and truly leaders. So we talked about having a training where North Tillamook County could present to our other coastal communities. These are the basics. These are the basic components of what we do. And then other communities can see how to put together their programs, because it won't be exactly the same for every community because there's different dynamics and different residents, etc. But to be able to share the basics and find out, where different communities are, what they need, what they have, what they don't have. So I'm really encouraged about that work, and I think that's all I'll say about emergency management today. I'll move right into commissioner reports, which is just me. And I want to go back to something I was talking to Representative Gomberg about, which was the Shiloh levee. This is very exciting. In Tillamook, there's a training levee that is beside the Shiloh restaurant and hotel, and along the Wilson River, and that training levee protects the Wilson River Bridge. It protects all those businesses. It protects 101 on North 101. It protects that whole area, farms, houses. And it's breaking down. It's still functioning, but it's damaged. So we've been looking for money to repair the Shiloh levee, and the legislature on Sunday afternoon, they passed it in the SB 5506 spending bill. They appropriated $1.26 million for the repair of the Shiloh levee, which is, if I could be cheering on the radio right now, that's so exciting. So it's, we've known for a long time that it needed to be done, and now we have some money to do it, and I just couldn't be happier about that. So thank you to Senator Weber and to all of our legislators who passed that for the Shiloh levee. It's really great. A couple of other things I wanted to talk about are, this is something fun. This weekend I had a visitor from out of town, a young person, and so I got to play tourist in Tillamook County and show her around. And I just had such a good time, and so did she. And it reminded me of how wonderful Tillamook County is for visitors. We know how wonderful it is for us. But living here, you maybe stop going to all the visitor attractions. But I took her to the cheese factory. She loved it. We went tide pooling on the low tide on Saturday, which was very fun. And we went to the rodeo, which was a blast. I want to thank everybody who works hard on the rodeo. The rodeo has a hard-working board and loads of volunteers, and it was a terrific event. There was a group of women horsewomen who did this riding. And I don't know the right words for this, but what it was choreographed riding with their horses, and it was like a dance routine with their horses. It was so beautiful and impressive. It was just outstanding. So bravo to those horsewomen, and bravo to everybody who works hard to put on that event. It was really great. And we also had fabulous breakfast at the Fern. So shout out to the Fern. And if anybody hasn't been to the Fern lately for breakfast, you should check it out because it was awesome. The last thing I wanted to talk about today is last week I went to a meeting of a group called Braver Angels. And you can look this up online. It's at braverangels.org. And this ties in with what Representative Gomberg was talking about working across the aisle, bringing together disparate groups, and trying to. Braver Angels formed in order to address the issue of increasing polarization in our country. Their mission is to bring Americans together to bridge the partisan divide and strengthen our democratic republic. And this issue is big in my mind and on lots of people's. Lots of people talk to me about this, about how our community, not only here in Tillamook County, but in the state and in the nation, our communities and, our nation are becoming increasingly polarized and divided, and how a lot of people want to get back to working together, to working across the aisle and working together. And so I went to this Braver Angels group. We don't have an alliance here on the coast, but they have one in the Willamette Valley. So I went with a couple neighbors to a Braver Angels meeting in Washington County to see if we want to start one here. And it was really heartening. It was good work. For it to work, there has to be a balance of red-leaning folks and blue-leaning folks, and obviously, if this is going to work, we have to have everybody in the room and at the table. And so there was a balance in the room, and people didn't necessarily identify themselves that way. It's not like, we didn't wear stickers that said red or blue. But then we sat at tables, and we discussed in an organized way, we discussed homelessness. So apparently different meetings will choose different topics, and topics that are meaningful to everybody. And the purpose of it was to really listen to each other, understand each other's concerns, and not to try to convince each other of anything or, change anybody's mind about anything, but really to grow an understanding and compassion, and to discover how many things we have in common on any given issue. And so I thought it was very dynamic. I'm encouraged. I'm going to keep learning about it. There are a number of people now who are interested in starting the Braver Angels Alliance in Tillamook County, and if we do, we're going to need people who are both red-leaning and blue-leaning in order to start these conversations. So I'm hopeful about it. It makes me hopeful to think, there's something, when you see a problem, it's really nice to be able to apply a solution. I just want to get into the solution. So, this is a possible solution. So I'm encouraged about that. And with that, I think I will go on to the cities. Do we have someone with us from Manzanita today?
Yes, can you hear me, Commissioner Bell? That's Simmons.
Yes. Good morning. Good morning, Mayor.
Thank you for doing this. We have several things going on this week. The Dorcas Street construction will continue into July, and there is a weekly update on the Public Works site. We want to thank all the people for the patience, because there's a lot of big equipment moving around there, a lot of noise, and we just keep thinking how wonderful it's going to be when it's finished. The Farmers Market will be Friday at Underhill Plaza. That's at 635 Manzanita Avenue, and those hours are 4 to 7. The next Mayor's Monday will be in the library on July 3rd. We meet from 10:30 to 11:30 for a casual chat. There is no agenda. And we are getting ready for the 4th of July, where our theme for the parade is Return to Glory. I want to first thank all of the volunteers who are pulling this major event together. This is one of the busiest times in Manzanita, as Manzanitans know. The parade starts at 1 o'clock, and the judging of the floats in the staging area at Underhill Plaza will begin about 12. And I believe that the parade route is posted on the city website. The next city council meeting will be Wednesday, July 5th. This is an in-person meeting at the Pine Grove on Moneta, and that council meeting begins at 6. And last, I just want to wish everyone a safe and happy holiday week ahead. This is one of the busiest times in our little city. The town is full to bursting, and it requires a lot of patience from our citizens as we welcome the thousands of people who will be enjoying our town also. So thank you, Commissioner, and have a good week ahead. Happy 4th of July.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Happy 4th of July to you, too.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone online from Nehalem? How about Wheeler? Rockaway Beach?
Good morning, Tillamook County. Charles is here. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Mayor. Yes, we can.
Thank you. All right. A couple of things. I want to just echo what the mayor from Manzanita said. Our town will be bursting at the seams over this coming holidays, and we're all ready to welcome tourists and look forward to them spending money and bolstering the cash registers of our merchants. Along that vein, Rockaway Beach did pass its SDR fee adjustment, and revenue from that additional fee will be used to maintain the balance of interest between renters, rental owners, and residents and support enforcement of our STR ordinance. You still have time to join our July 4th parade. There are details on our website, and the parade starts in Rockaway Beach at 11 a.m. on the 4th. We have a planning commission vacancy, and applications can be found on our website. Those of you who are interested in being a seasonal firefighter in Rockaway Beach, you can click the link on our website or stop by the Rockaway Beach Fire Hall on drill night every Thursday at 6, or email the fire chief at thesse@corb.us, thesse@corb.us. And then just a reminder that the Burn Ban begins on July 15th. Happy 4th, and everybody be safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor McNeely. Do we have Mayor Hall on, or anyone from Garibaldi? about Bay City?
Good morning, Commissioner. Can you hear me?
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. So I would like to start by giving a shout out to Dale Kamrath, who has been serving as our interim fire chief for the past, I believe, 7 months. So his term is ending this week with the end of June, and he has done a great job, guiding our fire department through this transitional time, and I'd like to thank him for all the help he has given. And I think part of that was really reflected this weekend in the accidents, which were mentioned there on Highway 101 between Garibaldi and Bay City. And I'd like to thank the emergency responders and all the firefighters and the support groups that turned out for that and turned that terrible situation into something that was handled very professionally. We really appreciate their involvement. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the commissioners for having this community call every week. I think it's been very informative to the community and a real help. And I say that because this will be my last community meeting as mayor. As some of you may know, I will be resigning as mayor effective July 1st and taking a job with the city. And Council President Baker will be stepping in as acting mayor starting July 1st. So I'd like to thank you for having these calls and all the things we've done over the last few years. It has been a real honor and a pleasure to serve the citizens of Bay City in this capacity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for your service, not only to the City of Bay City as mayor. By all accounts, you've done an outstanding job as mayor of Bay City, and I'm sure they're sorry to lose you as mayor, and happy to gain you as an employee. Congratulations on your new job. And this also means that you'll be leaving your position with the county as manager of solid waste. And I am congratulating you and simultaneously sorry for us that we're losing you. But I completely support you in this move in your career. And I want to thank you for your excellent, long-standing service to Tillamook County Solid Waste. That you have brought the program, the solid waste program, into the modern era, and you've achieved programmatic changes that I'm sure no one dreamed of when the county hired you. You've done an outstanding job managing that program, and you've left it in excellent shape for someone else. And I'm very grateful for your service. Sorry we're losing you. Happy for Bay City that they're getting you, and I wish you all the best. Thank you for your community service.
Thank you very much, and I think that I've got a good team that we've grown in the solid waste department who's going to be able to take over and carry on and bring it to the next level, under the leadership of Justin Weiss. So, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Tillamook City Manager Nathan George is not available this morning, so we'll go to South County. Do we have Doug Olson with us this morning?
Hello, Commissioner. Doug Olson here.
Good morning.
I'll give you a couple of updates here. I'm on my way to Tillamook Lightwave, so I may or may not be readable, but I'm not driving and talking, as I don't want to be arrested by a good sheriff. So, a couple of things this week. First of all, Saturday, I should say, July 1 is Clover's Day, and I believe that's the 41st annual Clover's Day. It will be a parade right down the middle of Cloverdale and Highway 101, and that's the famous parade led by a cow. I think maybe the only parade in all of America that's led by a dairy cow. And that's been going on, like I say, for over 40 years, so everything has come together. We're good to go. Second thing that people should know is a regular chamber meeting on July 4, a week from today, Tuesday. We're not going to have that for fairly obvious reasons. Number one, it's a holiday. And number two, if we moved our chamber meeting to another date, it usually ends up conflicting with something else. And so we just said, let's not meet in February, and we'll be right back in full force in August. So with that, Commissioner, I wish everyone a very happy and safe 4th of July, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate you joining us, and thanks to everyone for listening. And as we close this call, it occurs to me that we haven't talked about this call next week, but in fact, next Tuesday is the 4th of July. So I'm going to make the executive decision that we will not have this call next Tuesday because everyone will be off work and presumably not available. So we will not have this call next Tuesday on 4th of July. And I want to wish everyone a happy 4th of July holiday, safe, happy, healthy, and our best to everyone in the community. Thank you to KTIL for broadcasting. Thanks to everyone for participating in this call. Thanks to everyone for listening. We are adjourned at 9 a.m.